Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
podcast for parents and families everywhere.
Whether you have kids that plan to attend college or you have current college students, you want them in and you want them to graduate.
You want a quality education that will give you a skill set that will make you marketable for the jobs of today and the jobs of tomorrow. I am Mark Stucker, and I'm a college coach from Metro Atlanta.
And I am Anika Madden, and I am a parent also from Atlanta, currently in North Carolina.
And I'm David Williams, and I'm a dad from Chicago, Illinois. This week in the news, new international students to the United States may hit a post-World War II low. A great article from Forbes by Stuart Anderson. Mark and Anika will discuss, is it true that some colleges will reduce my grants if I receive a private scholarship? Our question from a listener is actually going to be bonus content, where Mark discusses a major problem that students are having when they are comprising their college list. And there is no college spotlight since Gil Villanueva is discussing the University of Richmond in our interview.
Good morning, friends. Quite a few announcements today. First of all, Dave and I talked about how the Trump administration was going to prevent international students from coming to the U.S. if they were studying online. And 20 states joined in, and it was coming right before a judge to make a decision. And most of the experts thought that the 20 states were going to win the lawsuit. So the Trump administration said it will no longer require foreign students to attend in-person classes during the coronavirus pandemic in order to remain in the country. So, and swift immigration policy reversal, the Trump administration on Tuesday of this week, which is a few days before you'll hear this, they bowed to snowballing opposition from the universities. And the Silicon Valley had also joined in. In addition to the 20 states, Silicon Valley has also lended their support to this initiative. So that's very, very encouraging. We're all really happy about that because the ramifications would have been so significant. Also, and this is K-12 news, but it impacts college admissions in kind of a major way. So Los Angeles and San Diego all said that they will be starting public school online. Atlanta said they're going to go the first 9 weeks online and then evaluate from there. And that includes me because I'm paid through Metro Atlanta school system. So I'm told we're online until mid-October. Prince George's County is another one that is doing that. These are large counties. Arlington County, really large county, doing that. And Governor Cuomo has said that in order for in-person classes to be allowed, a region must be in phase 4 of the reopening. And currently New York City is not at phase 4. And so unless school districts have a very low daily infection rate and it remains at 5% or less over a 14-day average, New York City, obviously a huge school district, will not be going. Houston has said they'll be doing their first 6 weeks online. San Francisco starting online. So you get the picture. And it's happening across the country. And one of the reasons why I wanted to bring this up in the context of college is I guess I just want everybody to think, if schools are concluding that a student can't be here from 8 to 3 because it's not safe to them or the teachers or their parents back home, what does it say for 24/7 exposure in the dorms?
Yes.
In a college setting. I think it's a tell. And I mentioned this to you once before, the school districts get a per pupil allotment of money, so they're able to actually make decisions irrespective of their own finances. Where the colleges feel the pressure, will they even exist or will they exist in what form if they go online? So they're not able to strictly make the decision off of what's in the best interest of students. They also have to look at, will we be able to actually be in existence? Any thoughts, Dave?
Well, we've brought this up multiple times in the past. I mean, how in the world can students socially distance? We've actually discussed a variety of articles that's brought this to the fore. At the time that we were talking a couple weeks or even months ago, there was some hope that we would have control over this first wave, that we would crush it. And so we would be speaking from a theoretical that the caseload in August was low, and how can we prevent a reoccurrence? But that theoretical is not the current reality. The current reality is that the first wave never went away. We never got control of it. And now we truly have pandemic situations throughout most of the United States where the prevalence of the virus is such that the ongoing infections, we have no control over that. So I just don't see in this setting how students can realistically go back to college and the colleges not expect that their campuses won't be reflecting the same levels of infection that we're seeing in the communities at large. And these infections right now are pretty much out of control. So let me turn it back over to you, Mark. But do you think there's going to need to be a reevaluation even in September if we continue to hit these daily record rates of infections? I think we're going to have a completely new reappraisal even from now in 3 weeks' time.
Yeah, I mean, the schools are just in such a quandary because they kind of have to make decisions now. You can't decide 3 days before if you're opening. So they're forecasting out, and God bless them. They're trying so hard to strike this balance. You know, Rice University just announced yesterday a very unique approach. So they're having all their classes outside. Now they're in Houston. Wow. They could do some things. And so what they're doing, they're saying, students, if you can bring a lawn chair, bring one. Not they'll supply them. I know they are. And then they're constructing these 5 huge tents and they're building 4 large temporary outdoor structures. So you'll be under these outdoor structures of these tents and they're going to have circles around to enforce social distancing, requiring masks. So, you know, they're trying hard to strike that balance between preserving your health, their financial health. But, you know, when Dave and I talked about this several months ago, we always said, this is contingent on not having another major outbreak.
Yeah.
And that another major outbreak is happening. And remember, flu season, September to March in that range? I mean, that's still around the corner. And all the experts believe that should be an exacerbating factor. So, once again, we're not telling you not to go back to college. Everybody's situation is different. I would be a hypocrite not to do that. My own daughter is going back. Right. Her situation I do feel is unique. She's 20 some credits away from graduating. She's living off campus and she has a kind of an off campus life too. But Dave, I think this is a good time to roll out your official announcement. We've talked about it before, but I think it's a good time to share it. You want to share your big decision?
Well, there's several. Give me a clue. Which one?
The fact that Lauren has officially decided to take a year leave of absence.
Yeah. She's officially decided to take a year off. Actually, she's very excited. She's in the midst of applying for some great internships. I won't tell which center because I don't want to jinx her, but she's in the interview process now. She's gotten through the first stage, and I think she's looking at this as a really exciting time to grow and get perspective before she goes back. But she was quite adamant that she did not want to recreate an online experience for the remainder of her sophomore year. And I was quite relieved that I wouldn't have to pay for that experience.
Well, and I'll say something, Dave, because, you and I had a disagreement. So Dave,
that's right.
Dave has had the opinion for some time that students who go back are going to end up being sent back.
Right. Absolutely.
And they are going to end up back on, doing school from home online and stuck with the bill. And I've disagreed with that. I've said, look, for financial reasons alone, that's the last thing in the world that's going to happen. I think there's probably a 1 in 7 chance of that happening.
Yeah.
I won't say it's more than 50%, but I definitely wouldn't say it's 1 in 7 anymore. Looking at that outbreak, I'd probably say 1 in 3 and who knows? So, here's the balance I'm trying to strike with you guys in this conversation. Everybody has their own unique situation and you need to decide what's best for you. Yeah. And that's how I approached it with all my clients. However, I will say this. I've had 4 or 5 of my clients reach out to me and say, I'm leaning toward taking the year off or a semester off. What do you think? And in every case, I have thought, I think you're making a good decision. These are all people that were looking at living in the dorms, staying on campus. They were all freshmen. So I want to strike the balance with our listeners between respecting each individual personal decision that you have to make, knowing your situation, but not holding back and kind of telling you my opinion. And I will say this, if Joy was about to be in the dorm, she would not be going to the dorm, so I wouldn't be paying for it. And I just want to let you know my opinion and take it for what it's worth. I just feel I owe you that.
And to add to that, my wife was quite skeptical about my fears, and she was actually leaning towards Lauren going back to school. And around this time, the states were just starting to reopen. And I said, well, this is going to be a test, because every time we turned on the TV, and you know this, Mark, what did you see? Beaches filled with young kids, bars filled with young kids, streets filled with young kids. And so I said, well, we'll know in 3 or 4 weeks. I mean, if the virus is actually going to die out in the summer and it's resistant to these type of socializations, that's one thing. But if we see a rapid recurrence based on all these kids clearly not social distancing, then we will have an interesting test for what the experience of going back to the dorms might be like. And we're seeing it now. I mean, the virus just exploded, especially in places like Florida and Texas, and even in places like Wisconsin, where they famously rolled back the mask provisions and people went to the bars the night of the judicial statement and said, we're going to party and forget the mask. In those very same places, you have the spread of the virus. So that was a test. And now my wife is like all on board and saying, and her big thing is, I do not want to put my child at risk. So there you have it. We had the real life test, and we know that the risk is real. How the colleges and each individual responds now is going to be a very tough decision for each individual in college to make.
There you go. All right, let's transition. So hopefully we struck the balance. We're not judging you. I would be a hypocrite because my own daughter's going back. But I do want you to know, Dave and I both have the opinion, if we're going to have kids in the dorm, that's not something we would be advocates of.
Great. And can I ask one last thing? I do believe that schools that have the ability will do things like, for example, in New Haven, half the hotels are closed down. I think one of the options they may consider is they're already saying they're only going to bring half the students back. They're going to make sure that each student instead of being in a triple, they're in a double. There's going to be a lot more single options. And I think they're going to consider renting out a lot of the vacant hotel rooms, so a lot of the kids can have the options to be in single room situations. So I do want to give that balance, that there are.
You know what, Dave, I'm really glad you brought that up. I'm really glad you, because let me restate my view too. If my child was going to be in the dorm with a roommate, I would not advocate for that. I think if you're in a situation with a single, I think it's a lot more, you can make a stronger case. But each family has to decide. We just wanted to kind of, give someone updates on this information. Very Transitioning. Good. I know I mentioned, So I'm having a blast interacting with your College Bound Kid listeners on Twitter. I changed my Twitter handle. I just want you to know. I said before it was Mark Stucker at 171 Answers, but I'm like, hey, I'm talking about the podcast all the time. So it's now Mark Stucker at YCBK Podcast. So you won't find me on the old handle I gave you, but you will find me at Mark Stucker at YCBK Podcast. If you're on Twitter, join us. I think you're going to love the interaction. Also, we've talked about these Zoom sessions that we have coming up for our listeners. 3 of them. One with the Director of Admission at Richmond, who you're hearing right now in our interview, Gil Villanueva. One with the Director of Admission at UC Santa Barbara. We've got that coming up as our second one, Lisa Prescott. And then the third one, Sam Prouty, Director of Admission at Middlebury. The sign-up sheet is up. You just go to yourcollegeboundkid.com under the resources tab, click question and answers with YCBK interviewees. Now, most of the time, the invitation will come to you from the college themselves. So if you've signed up for the Richmond one, I'm giving all the email addresses that have signed up so far over to Gil Villanueva, and then his staff will send out the invitation for a private one-on-one session. Ask any question about anything, about college life, college admissions. Take advantage of the fact that these 3 people have 75 years experience. We're looking forward to seeing you there. One more thing I want to share. Read the fine print really carefully when it comes to how you apply. Deadlines, because there are a lot of new creative options that are emerging this year. One that was just announced yesterday, which I'm really excited about. Georgia Tech is adding a second early action round. So this is how complex this can be. Georgia Tech in the past has had early action October 15th, but you didn't find out until mid-January. And you're like, why did it take so long? Because they got so many applicants. So now what they're doing, October 15th, is only for in-state, and in-state students will find out before Christmas. And then they're having an EA2 deadline of November 1st for out-of-state. And so there's 2 different rounds for EA. And a lot of schools are adding different twists to their admission process. So you may think this school is our regular decision, this school's early decision. Check it, because schools are making changes to accommodate what's going on. I happen to think that's a brilliant move, and I told Rick that yesterday. I think that's fantastic. So keep attuned to that. I could have made that our admissions tip, but I have another one. So an admissions tip. One thing I'm hearing from some admission officers I interact with, that because of the pass-fail grade so many schools are using, they're going to be putting more weight this year on the school you are coming from.
Wow. We knew that.
Yeah. And one reason for that is Slate software, which so many of the colleges use, can allow them now to just click a button and see who from your school came to their school and what kind of grades did they get at your school. So they can look at the track record of how kids from your school have done at their school. So just a little tip, a little more emphasis is going to be put on the track record of your school with the individual college. Not for everybody, but I'm hearing that from multiple people. And for the admissions vernacular, Dave, you want to take a shot at this one?
Yes, we got it. I got Anika on speed dial. She's my phone friend. Anika, be by your cell phone on this one.
Good one, man. I love it. The word is Ghost App.
Ghost App. Oh, I think I know this one. That's an app I think just appears out of the blue like a ghost. Boom. Where'd this person come from? He never went to our podcast sessions, our admission sessions. I think he never met the regional rep. He just appears out of blue like Casper, the friendly ghost. Boom.
Bingo, bingo. Winner, chicken dinner again. Yes. Yeah, a ghost app, like they may as well be from Mars. They are not in the system. They did not go on and fill an inquiry form out. They're just there. And believe it or not, colleges get 35 to 50% of ghost apps, depending on the school. Right. So it's pretty common.
Yep.
Let's turn to college hot topics in the news. Take it away, Dave. Article time.
Article time. Stuart Anderson of Forbes gives a great article that the new international students to the United States may hit the lowest level since World War II. So, Mark, I'm just going to throw out some of these statistics and we're going to open it up for discussion. So he says, why is that? Partly because the U.S. consulate is not processing visas, partially because we have travel bans with almost every country in the world, it seems like, and they're having travel bans with us. And there's other challenges. So how bad are the numbers? Well, in 2018 and 2019, we had about 269,000 international students come to this country. But they are estimating that we may lose 63 to 98% of that number, so that we may only have a high of about 87 to 100,000 students, or a low as 6 to 12,000 students. And how do they get that number? By the way, these numbers are from the National Foundation for American Policy. Well, they say if we lose all the students except from Canada and Mexico, but all the Canadians and Mexicans decide to come, we'll get about 12,000. However, if ongoing travel ban issues that we're having, because right now you can't travel to Canada because they're restricting the United States, as in Mexico, we only could get half of that. So we may only get 6,000 students. To give that comparison, in 1948 and 49, there were 7,800 students that came to the United States. So that's after World War II. And in 1981, we had like 100,000 students. So that's a huge hit. And Mark, let me start now and let's throw it out to discussion. And and see what you think about those numbers.
Yeah, and I'm going to even throw more numbers. So if you're numbers phobic, this is not going to be the segment for you. But just to put in perspective, so the United States has been having consistently now for a few years over 1 million international students. 1 million.
Yeah.
So to see how that breaks down, China 369,000, India 202,000. So I'm giving you the order of the top 10 countries. Yeah. South Korea is third with 52,000. Saudi Arabia is fourth with 37,000. Canada fifth with 26,000. Vietnam sixth with 24,000. Taiwan seventh with 23,000. Japan eighth with 18,000. Brazil ninth with 16,000. And Mexico tenth with 15,000. So if we just take the top two countries, though, China and India, that is 570,000 students. Wow. So it's a significant number. Now, just to put another thing in perspective, I told you this is going to be numbers today. Mm-hmm. So the number has been growing. So just to get a sense of how this number has been growing, in 2012, 2013, that number went up 10% or 9.8 to be technically accurate. Okay, almost 100,000 new students. In 2013 and 14, it went up 7.7%. In 2014-15, 8.8%. 15-16, 2.4%. And then ever since 16 to 17, the last 3.5 years, the numbers have just been going down. So decrease of 3.3% in 16-17, 6.6% in 17-18. Slight uptick in 18-19 is still a decrease, but not as much of a fall off as the 6.6. And now we're looking at a drastic fall off. And if you're curious, how does that compare to how many Americans go overseas? Well, 341,751 Americans went overseas in the most recent year. And if you're curious, 12% to the UK, 11% to Italy, 10% to Spain, 5% to France. So this is significant on a lot of levels. And one of the ways it's significant, of course, there's a loss of culture in terms of what these students bring. Tremendous culture. I know when I look back, particularly when I think of my experience at boarding school, and I was there, for those of you who are new, I did 9 years of boarding school admissions and college counseling. I did 1 year of college. So, and so oftentimes draw off that because it's more recent, it was longer, and it's fresher in my mind. The college year was 1991. So that's starting to get a little back 29 years ago. I have some memories, but they're not as strong as my boarding school years. So in boarding school, the experience was so rich. To this day, now I was an adult, let alone a kid, but I remember these invaluable conversations that I had with different international students, whether they were coming from France or Ghana. These are all conversations I remember. Sweden, Palestine, rich conversations. We had 13 countries alone on the soccer team. Right. And so students are certainly going to lose out on the richness of the experience, the conversations, and the broadening of the horizons. There is another component, though, and it's important to bring this in as well, and that is the tremendous financial loss that is happening to colleges by seeing the drastic reduction of international students going from 1 million to 100,000 at most, and maybe a little bit more than 10,000. There's a lot of factors that still are to be determined whether it's going to be closer to 10,000 or 100,000. And this is one of the reasons why the largest financial aid organization has joined in and chimed in and talked about how much of a consequence colleges are going to experience if the numbers look as bleak as they are. So here's a statement actually from NAFSA, Association of International Educators. They sent a letter to the administration requesting that guidance be rescinded. Now, this had to do when the Trump administration was looking at not allowing visas for students who are online. And here's what their statement says. The guidance modifications are harmful to international students. They put their health and well-being and listen to this, and that of the entire higher education community at risk.
Yep.
So, Dave, I've been talking for a while. What are your thoughts? I've got a few more things to say, but I'm sick of my voice right now.
Well, you mentioned some of these statistics in the past, and that is, what do international students bring to the table? They bring $48 billion in direct tuition and fees. They bring over 450,000 jobs just related to the servicing of these international students. But then, to me, the biggest issue is intellectual capital. Most of these students truly represent the best and the brightest in the world. And if you think I'm overstating that case, I actually looked at the percentage of Silicon Valley right now that's foreign born. It's 40%. And the fact is that when we look at the technological revolution all around us, whether it be in 5G or whether it be in shopping online and so forth, without the foreign infusion, we would not be the leaders in these fields going forwards. And countries like Canada and Australia and Europe will happily take these students because of what they're going to contribute to the economies going forward. So these losses are just not going to be in the present, but they represent such a great potential loss in the future that there's an article in The Economist right now saying that the U.S. may lose its standing if it does not reverse this trend to decreasing foreign student enrollment.
Dave, I'm glad you really brought that up about the loss of intellectual capital, because it's not just about the 4 years that people are here. What happens all too often, well, not all too often, what happens quite frequently, and I would argue in a positive sense, is students end up staying. End up staying. They go to grad school, they get married, they have families, they have specific skill sets that enable them to work in this country. They find that they like it here, and then they contribute to the economy and to the upgrading of our civilization. But I want to go back and answer a question that we haven't answered yet, and that is, why would there be this drastic reduction in international students? Why would there be such a drastic reduction? How could you go from literally 1 million to now we're talking about is it going to be 10 to 100,000? So 4 reasons that stand out. One is students literally cannot get visas from certain targeted areas. And in this article mentions some of those specific areas where you literally just cannot get a visa from. So that obviously diminishes the ability of students to come over. Second thing is, and I talked about this a little bit when we did a podcast, about a year ago on international enrollment and tips for international students that want to come over here. It can take a long time to get a visa. So even now, you're going to run into major complications about not having the time to get a visa, even if you're not in one of the targeted areas. The third thing is, these are smart people. They're picking up that they're not welcome here. They're picking up that tenor from the top of the administration. It's not a welcoming environment. Immigrants are being blamed and scapegoated. So many of them are saying, why would I want to go to an environment that's not welcoming? And then a fourth reason right now is our COVID numbers are disastrous. So now, even if you feel as if, I'm okay with the political climate, there may be some immigrant bashing, but I'll tolerate that because I want to come. Now you have to look at the health risks that we have. I mean, Dave and I were talking off air before we came on here, how many countries we can't travel to right now because they've deemed our country high risk.
That's right.
So I just thought it would be important to bring in the reasons. Why is it that these numbers have so precipitously dropped off?
Well, and I just wanted to add that in this article, it says that the current travel bans or restrictions that we have in place right now affect China, the United Kingdom, Ireland, Iran, most of Europe, and Brazil, which represent 40 to 50% of the international students coming in right now. And they didn't even count the fact, and we had pointed this out, that, we were thinking about go visiting our family in Canada. hey, they have a 30-day rolling restrictions on U.S. Coming in, and they won't let us in with our current numbers and so if we're not improved by September, there's a high probability that many Canadians, if they come down to the United States, won't be able to come back in unless they have a really compelling reason.
Yeah, and let's say you're listening and you're thinking, well, I don't necessarily think I'm going to hang out with international students anyway. I kind of like hanging out with the kids that I went to high school with. Well, the financial ramifications of this are going to impact everybody. Now, here's an extreme example, but I'll use it to make a point. Illinois Institute of Technology, 75% of the students are international. You imagine what it's going to do to their budget? And remember, international students pay full price, and oftentimes there's student fees they pay. So there are additional fees that are going into the school budget. So let's say it's not an extreme like 75%. Many other schools, if they lose 5% of their international population, remember, the average private school has a tuition discount rate of 52%. So if you're talking about 5%, that's 10% of budget because these are full pay families. These are not families that are receiving financial aid in the overwhelming majority of instances. There are a few schools that give aid to internationals, but not very many. It's by far the minority. So the impact on the budget, if you're not getting that money as a school, then one of two things is going to happen. They're either going to have tuition hikes that get passed on to Americans, or they reduce their services. And all of a sudden you wonder why there's only 2 teachers in a department that you really like because they had to make cuts. Or you wonder why those top professors that you liked are not teaching anymore because they told them they were getting a salary freeze and they went somewhere else. So it has ramifications for all of us, whether it's the cultural experience, the talent you're bringing to the country, or budget ramifications. So this is a real serious issue, and it's one that we've talked about a little, but it's been a while since we've really had a full-fledged in the news talking about how grave of an issue this is. And anytime, if you talk to any boards of trustees or presidents or provosts or deans, anybody at all in school leadership on the administration side that knows the financial aspect of a college, this is of grave concern. Business managers, anybody like that. This is a grave concern because of the financial hit colleges are taking, which is one of the reasons why the 20 states bandied together really quickly and put the lawsuit together. Yeah, it wasn't going to be fair to the students, the international students. Yes, it wasn't going to be fair to our students. All of those things are true, but it was going to be devastating also to the budget.
Yep.
Now it's time for our step-by-step walkthrough of the college admissions process.
Okay, Anika Madden, the $64 million question is, what are you planning on doing with John in school?
You know what? That's an excellent question. I don't have the $1 million answer yet.
Not surprised. Yeah. We're in a topsy-turvy, crazy world, so why should I expect anything to be so straightforward right now?
Exactly. Yeah, I got all kinds of messages from the school, like within the last 24 hours. I just got to wrap my little brain around it and get to it. But we'll see.
Have they made a decision yet what they're doing?
Well, I think it's going to be a mixed return, where they come in staggered phases and something online. I'm honestly not sure. That's just kind of what I've heard. And again, I've got to check all these. I literally just got messages from the school, like, was it last night or something? So we'll see. We'll see.
So let's dive in, Anika. I know the last 2 weeks we did a part 1 and a part 2 on how to find and where to find and which ones to go after concerning outside/private scholarships. This is really a part 3 on that same topic. And the name of the chapter of my book for this one is it true that some colleges will reduce my grants if I receive a private scholarship? So you've read the chapter. What are your takeaways?
Well, I was a little distraught. That was my first takeaway. Because as you list in the chapter, I assume if my child gets an outside scholarship, that is going toward my unmet need. And apparently that's not always the case. But I will say, and I was interested, and I'm interested to hear more when you say, 1 out of 5 schools are the ones that are doing this. And I wonder if we can just pause there for a second, because I need to know who these folks are like right now. Like, who is not taking my child's hard-earned work and not applying it to the money that I need to pay for school?
Well, let's start by talking about the argument, because there's an argument on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And there's another term for this, by the way, which is called scholarship displacement. And for those of you who are not following, because it kind of feel we just dove right into it. If someone's driving, they may not be following it. Do you want to explain basically the two options first of all, how it may work and not work? You want me to do that? How do you want to do that? Then we get into the two options.
I feel like I'm gonna chop it up, but let me just start off by saying that the displacement is that you've got this unmet need. Like you've got the formula about, how they come with your need. So you got the cost of attendance minus the expected family contribution, and that's your need. That's what you need that's the money that you need. So Correct. You're going after your child finds these private outside scholarships. They apply to them. So if your need is $5,000 and, they get a $2,000 scholarship, that $2,000 may be taken, maybe subtracted from some other area of the award that was given to them. Like, I guess maybe their merit scholarship.
Well, you're kind of getting there. So I'll just take a step back. So yeah, let's start with the formula. The basic financial aid formula, just like E equals MC squared and 2 + 2 is 4, is cost of attendance minus EFC equals your family financial need, right? And we know that colleges can meet your family financial need through 3 ways: through grants, through loans, and through student employment. So those are the 3 ways. We also know that the majority of schools actually don't meet your need. I've said before on many occasions, there's only around, 77 schools, last I checked, that promise even to meet a family's needs. So what the majority of the schools do is they leave a gap between what the financial formula says you should be able to pay and what they ask you to pay. So that's all background information. Okay, so the school gave $5,000 in gift aid, and you have a need of $50,000. So now there's still $45,000 left.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because gift aid is money you don't have to return, grants and scholarships. So there's $45,000 left. So let's say they threw in what most schools do, a $5,500 loan. Okay, and then they also threw in, let's say, some student employment, which is usually around $2,500. So that's another $8,000. Remember, student employment, loans, and grants and scholarships, that's all financial aid. So that now actually leaves $37,000. So that would be a case of a school gapping you because they didn't meet your need, right?
Right.
Okay, so let's say, so you have this huge gap of $37,000. Now, most people wouldn't go, but let's say you're one of these people like, we have to go. We just have to make it work. We're going. So Janae goes out and she gets $2,000 in this scholarship. There's 2 different approaches that schools use. One is to allow you to apply that $2,000 so you have less of a balance to pay, right? And according to the research by Mark Kantrowitz, 80% of schools do that. There are, however, 20% of schools that do what's called scholarship displacement. Just like it says displacement. Mm-hmm. So they are taking your scholarship away in a sense, and they're reducing the free money they give you. Instead of them giving you $5,000, now they're giving you $3,000 because you have $2,000 extra dollars. Now, there's 2 arguments, one for it, one against it. I already know where you come down,
Of course.
And I agree with you. But here's the argument for scholarship displacement. Let's say you were a school, Nika, you're a financial aid administrator, and you think a family's got a $50,000 need, so you give an X award based on the $50,000 need. Then you find out that they won $3 million in the Powerball lottery. Would it be wrong for you to say, we're not giving you the $50,000 because we're not giving you the money we were going to give you because you have more resources than we thought you had based on studying your income and assets? Would that be wrong for you to do that? For you to say, we're no longer giving you the money we were going to give you because you have additional resources. You won the lottery.
Yeah, but I think that's kind of extreme, though, because a $3 million lottery, okay. But if I'm only getting $5,000, let's just say I hit a $5,000 lottery. Like I still have a huge amount of money I still have to pay, and it's my responsibility to go figure it out. So
I hear you, and ultimately I agree with you, but that is the logic behind those who are against it. Their mindset is whether it's a $3 million or $3,000, you have more money than we thought you have. So when we assessed what we were going to give you, we didn't do the correct assessment because there were additional resources that you had that somebody else didn't have. That's the argument for scholarship displacement. Now, the argument on the other side is several things. One, you completely demotivated the student because in effect they were out there busting their tail off, applying for all these scholarships, and they got no personal benefit out of it. So you completely demotivated them. Secondly, the benefactor did not have that in mind when they designed the scholarship. They absolutely had every intention of that scholarship going to somebody who won it, not being used as additional resources for the school to give to somebody else. So I just kind of want to make the case for both sides so people can sort of see both sides. They can decide what side they come down on. But that's kind of the rationale for those who are for scholarship displacement. They use the lottery example and they say, whether it's 3 million or 3,000, the principle is the same. You have more money now. And when we did an assessment of what we were going to ask you to pay, we didn't have access to that knowledge. And therefore, somebody else has a greater need than you may have. And therefore, we're going to allocate it to them. So let me just stop for a second and see if you have anything that you want to say besides your very excellent point you made, which is there's a big difference between 3 million and 3,000 or 5,000.
No, I feel like a broken record. I'm like, that is so wrong.
Yeah.
It is totally wrong. Like I cannot even wrap my mind around it. But I guess the bottom line that I'm aiming to get to is how do you know if you're dealing with one of these schools? And to your point in the chapter, you're saying that every school has an outside scholarship policy, which I feel like I knew that, but maybe I forgot. I don't know. You
know why you knew that? Because you know when I did my Game Changer 10-hour college admissions video series in 2014, which you were a huge proponent of. You and I traveled all around promoting that thing. You even had signs on your car promoting that. So I spent 30 minutes in there talking about this. So that's probably where
you go. Okay.
Yeah. So let me first of all say this. What the majority of schools do is they first look at applying outside scholarship money to one of three sources. Is there a gap? So for schools that gap you, first thing they look at is, okay, let's just apply it to the gap. So if they apply it to the gap, that's just like money in your pocket. It's not reducing the grant. Like you already have a gap, so we'll just apply it to the gap. Secondly, they may reduce your loan. Or they might reduce the work study contribution that you have. And most of the time, what they will do is they will let you decide, okay, do you want to apply it to the gap? Do you want to apply it to reduce your loan? Or do you want to apply it to reduce your work contribution? So I just want to make it clear. That's what the majority of schools do. Where it becomes most problematic is if you have a school that meets full need, okay, so, cost of attendance is $50,000. EFC is $25,000. They give you $25,000. They meet your full need. And they do it without loans. So now there's no loans. They can't apply it to loans. They can't apply it to GAP. Where does the money go? There's actually a policy written that you can't over award. If you over award by over 300, I think it's 320, 300 something. Don't quote me on the 320, but it's between 300 and 400. If you over award, you can get in major, major problems with the federal government. So colleges actually can't give an award that exceeds the amount of the cost of attendance. So that's what most schools do. But there are certain schools that do it differently. They don't just apply it to your loan or your gap or or decreasing your work component. They don't. And there's all kinds of policies out there. They're all over the place. There's literally, there's so many different policies. There's some schools do what's called a shelter. Meaning like, okay, the first 2,000 goes to you, but then the next 2,000, 50% to us, 50% to you. I mean, there's so many different complications and variations of how schools do this. And so what are you thinking?
Buyer beware. Don't let me run in those with John. Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of things to say. So first of all, the way you want to find this out, which is your question, is the first thing you want to do is you want to Google Name your school, Kenyon College outside scholarship policy. First thing you want to do. And there should be a section of their website that describes it. If you don't find it, you should call the financial aid office and say, what is your scholarship policy regarding outside scholarships? And that's the first thing that you want to do. Now, let's say you run into a situation. So, I said this in the chapter, Nika. This actually happened to Karis. I was so upset because I've taught this. I know this upside down, inside out. And she got a $1,500 scholarship from KIPP. Okay. Because she graduated from KIPP. So she got a $1,500 scholarship from KIPP. And KIPP sent it directly to Davidson College. So what did Davidson College? Because Davidson College is one of these schools, they meet full financial need with no loans. So literally, there is no place for the money to go because no school actually decreases your EFC. I don't know why they don't, but there's no school that will decrease your EFC. They just don't. They're either going to apply it to your unmet need, but if there was no unmet need, where would they go? So as soon as KIPP sent it, I thought there was a possibility of this happening because I knew Davidson's policy. So I called and I tried to get it converted into a work study. I said, well, she actually did some volunteerism. And so they said, well, there's nothing we can do about it for this year, but next year we can. So she got the same $1,500 next year, and they coded it as work study. But for that year, I lost $1,500. I was hot, and I knew all about it. I knew this upside down, inside out, but there was literally no place for the money to go because there was no gap. They don't do loans. They meet full need. The only thing, and you'll find that for all the schools, Columbia, any school that meets full need with no gap and no outside policy, there's only a couple things they can do differently in those cases. One is they could try to see if you could appeal the cost of attendance. So you could say, okay, I don't agree with your published numbers because I have this additional expense. I had to get this computer. I had to get this, that, the other. There's a possibility you could make the case that the cost of attendance that you list is not my personal cost of attendance. And if you can find enough money to cover the scholarship, they could apply it there. But that's my experience is people don't usually win doing that. So what do you do then? Besides Google the school and find out their policy. Any other tips, any other suggestions of what a person could do?
I think it's all good to know. Take heed. That's all I can say.
There's two things. So the University of Maryland made it illegal back in 2017 to do this. One person just went on the rampage. They were so hot that's happened to them. They spent 2 years getting the law changed. So it's illegal to do scholarship displacement in Maryland.
Good for them.
The only state so far. Okay. Now, here's the best thing you possibly can do if this happens to you. Because from my experience, schools aren't going to generally just change their outside scholarship policy. And it's not that easy to make the case that you have this additional cost of attendance and apply the money there because not every school necessarily will give you that money for that, even if you can make the case. So here's what I recommend. This is something that the Mike and Susan Dell Foundation does in this case. It's a huge scholarship granting organization. You can reach out to them and ask them if they, instead of sending the scholarship money directly to the school, if they could just use it to pay off some of your student loan. And that's what they do.
Okay.
So that's my recommendation is reach out to the scholarship organization that got it. Say, listen, this money that I want is about to be displaced. They're going to reduce my grant. They're going to give it to somebody else. And there's a few other things they can do as well. That's one of them. They could also give it, they possibly could. Usually they won't send the money directly to the student because normally there's stuff written in schools' policies that say all outside scholarships have to go directly to them. But there are some other things that they can do, especially if it's after all the financial paperwork has been filed. So I know we kind of got in the weeds, but I want people to understand that. I don't want to discourage people, though, because most of the time, this doesn't happen that often. Now, look, Mark Hanchich, which knows this stuff upside down, inside out better than I do. I'm surprised it's 1 in 5. From my experience, it hasn't been the 1 in 5. I think it's been less than 1 in 5 schools that do that from my experience, but I'm never going to challenge that guy when it comes to money.
Ever.
No, he taught me more than what I have and what I know. So what are the takeaways, Anika?
I think we did it.
Yeah, the takeaway is know the outside scholarship policy of your school. And once you know it, then that should impact what how you proceed.
Mm-hmm.
In some cases, it won't be worth it for you to apply to outside scholarships, depending on the school. And in other cases, talk to the scholarship grading organization and see if they'll work with you. All right. I think we got it. Not trying to like dump a bucket of water on people's zeal. Anika and I are so grateful for everyone who has financially supported our podcast. It allows us to pay our staff and cover our other auxiliary expenses involved in having a weekly professional podcast.
At the start of every month, we're going to start sending a special gift to anyone who financially supports your college-bound kid.
I will be sending our donors this bonus content once a month directly to your email. The bonus content will be between 10 to 15 minutes in length. Usually it will be a college-related topic that I'm passionate about. Occasionally, it'll be another bonus hot topic in the news segment. Sometimes it'll be an answer to a question that one of our listeners submits to us via email.
And you'll receive these monthly audio blogs for a gift of any amount. We know that $5,000 to one person is $5 to someone else, and we don't want your budget to be a hindrance to you receiving this additional bonus content. So if you want to support our show, just go to yourcollegeboundkid.com and click the donate button. And if you've already financially supported our podcast, you will automatically start receiving this bonus content via your email.
This bonus content is our way of letting our financial supporters know in a tangible way how much we appreciate you. And if you have any questions at all about our monthly bonus content, just send your questions our way. That's to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Once again, questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com.
All right, Mark. Ooh, it's bonus content week time. So we have heard you talk about several mistakes people make or students make when they're building their list of colleges that they're going to be looking at and applying to. But there's one big one that you want to talk about, and I don't even know what it is, so I can't wait to hear it.
Yeah, sometimes it's good, we found, to not let you know, and this makes our conversation more spontaneous and more live. Like to hide it from you, and you find out just when a listener does.
All right.
So, and I got to give a few caveats before we start this. So, one of our most loyal listeners was talking to me, and she said, I like your podcast because you don't stress me out. I was listening to some other college admissions podcasts, and they were stressing me out. And your podcast doesn't stress me out. So I say all that to say, this is a very delicate topic I'm going to talk about. I'm not trying to stress anybody out. But I kind of see what I'm doing as in, I'm going to use an illustration, Anika. Most of my illustrations fall flat, but I'm going to try again anyway. So let's say that you were in Atlanta, Georgia, and you had a family vacation plan, and you were trying to decide, do we go to Myrtle Beach or do we go to Clearwater Beach and just outside of St. Petersburg? And I picked those two because they're almost the same distance apart in terms of drive, that 7 to 8, 9 hour range. And so you say, okay, guess what? We're going to go to Myrtle. So you sleep after you've packed and planned and everything. And you get up in the morning, have an early breakfast. You're all excited to go. And then your neighbor, who happens to be me in this illustration, rings the doorbell and says, aren't you planning on going to Myrtle Beach? Yes, you say. I said, I have some bad news for you. Do you know that there's a fire on the highway and everything's completely shut down? It's a 12-hour traffic jam. Okay. Now, if I said that to you, what would be going through your mind?
Darn. I don't know. What the heck are we going to do?
For some people, they'd be mad at the messenger. You just ruined my plans. Can't believe you told me this. So that's initial reaction. You just bore bad news and I'm mad and I'm taking it out on you. But after some reflection, you would probably think, what? I'm kind of glad they told me that because now we can just reroute our plans and go down to Clearwater. Okay. And not have that 12-hour delay. So that may make some sense in terms of where I'm going with this. So you're like, where's he going? What is he doing? Drugs or something?
I know it's coming. I know it's coming.
You know it's coming. Okay. So that's just all background. It may make sense in a second. So one of the biggest mistakes that I see people doing when it comes to building their college lists is they underestimate how much competition is out there when it comes to getting into the most selective and the most competitive schools. And so they look at it like, I'm kind of a pretty good student. I'm on the honor roll, or maybe it's even more than that. Maybe I'm up for valedictorian or salutatorian of my school, or I'm student body president, or I'm class president, or, you know what I mean? I've been a high achiever ever since I was in the 3rd grade, whatever level it is. So they think, I'm pretty sure I'll be a competitive applicant in any applicant pool in the country. And I see this all the time. And so what I want to do is just kind of break the numbers down for one school. And hopefully this will help people to understand just when it comes to the most competitive schools, just how competitive it really is. Okay, so I was looking at information for incoming class for Dartmouth College, one of the schools in the Ivy League. Okay, it's not the most famous school in the Ivy League. When people think of the Ivy League, they first think of Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Columbia, Brown, UPenn. It's probably one of the least known, I would say arguably the least known school in the Ivy League. But it's in the Ivy League, so that means hard to get into, selective competitive. So I've got a student looking at Dartmouth College. Okay, so let's just break this down. So this year, Dartmouth College had 582 spots for women in the class of 2019. 582, okay? Now, of those 582, 47% of them went to students who applied early decision. And they could give our audience a quick reminder on what early decision is.
So that's when you have an earlier deadline to apply, to be considered earlier and get an earlier response, basically. And you're also locked in too.
Correct.
You're locked in if you get it. Yeah.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So early deadline, early notification if you go and it's binding. Okay. So 47% of people, 47% of these 582 spots went to people who applied early decision. So that now leaves 308 spots for females in the whole world that did not apply ED. Okay. Now, let's say one of your parents graduated from college. Well, 15% of those 308 spots went to students that are first gen. Okay. And first gen is defined as neither parent graduated from a 4-year school. Now, we did a whole podcast on first gen. There's different definitions of first gen. Different schools have different definitions, but that's the most common definition. So that took 46 spots away. If one of your parents graduated from a 4-year college, then you can't get one of those 46 spots. That didn't go to you. Now, let's say neither one of your parents graduated from Dartmouth. Well, 12% of the spots went to what we call legacy applicants. So that takes 37 more spots away. Let's say you are living in the United States. Let's just pick a place. Pick any state in the country.
Let's do North Carolina.
Let's do North Carolina. Okay. Well, 10% of spots went to international students. So you don't qualify for that. So that takes 31 spots away. Okay. So this now leaves 194 spots for American females who are not legacy, not first gen, not international, and did not apply ED. 194 spots in the whole country. Now, 35% of students at Dartmouth play varsity sports. 35%. So let's say you're not a varsity athlete. Now, in fairness, most of these 35% will go early decision because coaches want to lock that up. They normally go ED. But let's say 70% of the athletes went ED. That means 30% did not. Okay, so now you're not an athlete. So now these 194 spots are now down to 174 spots. Okay, now 20% of the students at Dartmouth are Asian, so that's 35 kids. 11% Latinx, that's 19 kids. 10% Black, that's 17 kids. 64% Caucasian, that's 111 kids. So in the whole entire country, okay, and 8% are multiracial as well, okay? So in the whole entire country, 111 spots went to Caucasian females that did not apply ED. We're not first gen. We're not athletes. We're not legacy and not international. You say, well, that's a lot of spots, 111. But is it really? There's 50 states. 50 states. So that's basically 2 kids per state. And that was the largest group. For Black kids, there were 17 kids in the whole country for 50 states. So basically 1 out of every 3 states got somebody in. Latinx, 19 kids. Asian, 35 kids. So when you think, well, I'm a class president, I'm on the honor roll, I'm salutatorian, I'm valedictorian, it's very easy to be entrenched in your own echo chamber, in your own school world. This is where you go to school. This is where you stay after school. This is where you play sports. This is where you do plays. This is where you hang out with friends on a weekend. This is where your neighborhood. But now I'm trying a second illustration the same. I'm in trouble. I tried one. I'm going to try a second one. I want to pretend you're in a helicopter and you're flying over a helicopter and you look down, hey, there's my school. And then pretty soon you say, hey, there's another school. Next thing you know, you see 3 schools. Oh, 5 schools. Then it's 10. Then it's 50. Then it's 100. Well, you'd have to go the entire country to realize there's 40,000 high schools, 40,000 plus homeschool students, plus online students, plus international students. So you can be superstar, even in your county, even in your local area. And the numbers are just make it really, really competitive so that some super, super amazing kids are not going to get in. So I want to say a few more things, but I just want to stop, take a breath. And did that help to explain why a kid can be like a complete rock star and still just get rejected from some of the most competitive schools, Anika? Yes, no?
Yeah, kind of, sort of. But are you saying that most kids are putting these elite colleges on their list? Like how often is that every student that you work with thinks they have to get into one of these or wants to apply to one of these competitive schools? Is that just the demographic that you work with where it's all about these hard to get in colleges?
That's a great question, the way you asked it. So it's extremely common in private day schools, in private boarding schools, in affluent suburbs, but it's also common in inner city schools for high achievers. Like I work with a cross section of all of that. And people hear of a school or people say, oh, you're really smart. You should apply to Yale. You're really smart. You should apply to Stanford or Cal Berkeley or Duke. This is just very, very, very common. It's very common. And I see it all the time. I mean, I think I don't know if I said this with you or with Dave. I think it was with Dave, but I worked with exactly 100 students last year. Exactly. And that's a combination between KIPP and my school match fee, my private consulting. Well, it was 100 to the number. And I can't give you the number of people off the top of my head, that had a highly, highly competitive school on their list, but it's a high number. I would say it's more than half, probably more than half have a super highly competitive school on their list. And in some cases, it's completely warranted because they're a student that can compete or they should be applying. There's times I'm putting those schools on people's lists. I'm not saying don't apply to these schools. But what I'm saying is that if you put in perspective how much competition is out there, you shouldn't be surprised when you don't get in. Another thing I see people do is they'll have a really high test score. Okay. And let's say they got a 35 on the ACT, and let's say they got like a 750 on the math and a 730 on the verbal. And then they'll be like, oh, I've met the standards for Elite U because my test scores look kind of close to the test score averages that they put out. And what they don't understand, let's take Dartmouth, for example. The median math score at Dartmouth is about 780, and the median evidence-based reading and writing is in the low 750s. Okay? And what they don't understand is, take a guess, Anika, how many people in the country get over 700 on their math SAT?
A lot.
213,000. Okay? 143,000 get 33 or higher on an ACT. Okay, that's 2018 and 2019 numbers. Now, remember, the way I broke those numbers down, we go back to those for a second. I just did females that were not international, were not first gen, were not athletes, and did not apply ED. And what did we find? There were 17 spots for Blacks, 19 for Latinos, 35 for Asians, and 111 for Caucasians. Okay, and so people think, well, I got the test score. And they think getting the test score means they get in. But what they don't realize is that if you saw who those schools denied and rejected, there's almost no difference in the test score profile of the people they deny and as there is for the people they admit. they're constantly turning down people with perfect scores. I see it. I see people with perfect scores get turned down all the time at elite schools. It's not uncommon at all. And when I sit in committees, I see it all the time. It's not, people don't even flinch. I mean, I'm talking about these most selective schools. And so I'm not trying to rain on people's parade. I'm not trying to add more stress in their life. I'm trying to be the neighbor that knocks on the door and lets you know you're getting your hopes all up. But you need to realize that if you're talking about schools with under a 15% acceptance rate, they're a reach school for every applicant. Nobody can count on getting in those schools. Nobody can count on it. Like, you may get in, but you can't count on getting in. And so I think, if people have this perspective, it will prevent and mitigate a lot of pain. A couple of really quick stories. So I met with USC, University of Southern California, this year, and I met with their admission officer who's in Atlanta. And he said, Mark, our average kid we took last year had one non-A for 4 years on their transcript. One non-A. And when I read apps at Harvard last summer, their actual files with their admissions committee, remember there's this kid who was just incredible. I mean, this person was like the kind of person that you think, wow, I can't believe this person. There are actually kids like this out here. And so most of us were thinking, I'm sure we had to decide whether this kid was going to be admitted, denied, or waitlisted. And we told them our view, and then Harvard told us what they decided, because this is an actual application. And so this one person was extraordinary, but he had a lot of, setbacks and a lot of difficulties. And he did have 2 B+ on his transcript over 4 years. Like, one was in 9th grade and one was in 10th. And so we really weren't talking that much about the B+ because the kid was so extraordinary. And a very senior level person from Harvard was sitting in the committee with us. And she said, I haven't heard anybody mention his grades. These are low grades for us in our pool. So 2 B+ for 4 years. They said, these are low grades. These are low grades in our applicant pool. Like, that hasn't come up yet from anybody. So I'm not trying to rain on parades. I'm not trying to discourage people, because in reality, there are only 3% of the colleges in the whole country, Anika, that have an average test score of 29 ACT, 1370 SAT, and take 35% or less of their kids. Only 3%. So most schools are dying to have good 3.0 kid who's just a good kid. And there's so many schools that would love to have a 3.5 kid or a 3.7 kid or a 3.3 kid. But when it comes to the most selective schools, I'm seeing kids set their heart on these schools, not realizing the competition. And I'm just trying to protect people, because when you don't expect, if you have the mindset, I'm going to take a shot at this school, but I know that there's a good chance, like, they turn down, look, only 1 out of every 4 valedictorians gets in here. So, there's a great chance I won't get in, but I'm going to go for it. That's a very different mindset than, I'm a really good student. I think I'm getting in. And that's all I'm trying to do. So I'm going to stop, listen, and see what you think.
I think you did a great job. And I think I'm just not, me, I'm not used to that I got this whole elite list of schools. So I guess one point of clarification too is that in terms of the big mistake, it's not just about putting that school on the list, but it's also putting other schools probably that you don't even want on your list because you're so hyped up, to get into the one school that you probably won't get into. Is that the other part of it?
No, that's a really important point. One of the problems with this is you exert so much mental energy and sometimes time, sometimes money, because it can involve taking a plane all the way across the country, doing this, that, the other, that not only do you not get in your A plan, but you miss out on a really good B plan or a B+ plan or another plan because you fixate it. And that's what I'm trying to keep from happening. Okay. So, having a balanced list is the most important. I have a question for you. Do you think that you didn't approach it that way? Is that more of a function of your upbringing? Because most people who are really good students that I work with, they are aspiring to get into very competitive schools. That's the norm, not the exception. But I think that's different than you're thinking. Do you think that's more a reflection of how you were raised, or I'm just curious?
I don't think so. Maybe, I don't know, but I just that just hasn't been my train of thought.
Yeah, because it seems like when I talk about this, it's almost like your mindset is there are actually people out there that think that way. That's what I pick up.
I know that there are people out there that think that way, but how many? I'm surprised to know how many there are. Like I'm surprised to hear that it's more
then it's closer to the majority than the minority. I think that's the part I'm surprised about.
Especially for really good students. Now, what's not normal, let's say I have a student and they're like a 2.6 GPA and they get a 910 on the SAT and a 17 or 18 on the ACT or 20 on the ACT. They've had some, spotty discipline records and teacher recs aren't that great. It's not normal for them to do that. Like most of the time that student figures it out that I probably don't need to be looking at the brand name U, right? That's unusual. But it's more the person that's like been a big fish in their own echo chamber. And everybody is telling them, you're smart. You need to apply to, Berkeley and Duke and Georgetown and, and Vanderbilt and, you Chicago. Like it's more, a lot of times it's like it can come from the peers because they don't really know there's the numbers I just shared. And hopefully people understand I'm not trying to cause stress. I'm not trying to deject people. I'm not trying to steal dreams away from people. I'm just trying to get people to be prepared for the reality and to protect yourself with the balance list. Okay, friends, if you've been listening, you've been enjoying Gil Villanueva. And in part 1 and part 2, he talked about tips and advice for under-resourced students. But now we transition. And for the next 2 weeks, Gil is going to be talking specifically about the University of Richmond. So in this episode, he starts out by giving us the history of the University of Richmond. He gives his 2 to 3 minute elevator pitch, so we have a basic overview of Richmond. He talks about what makes the Jepson School of Leadership such a marquee program. He also talks about who Richmond overlaps with. And he talks about why students pick UR over the overlaps. Then Gil talks about the Richmond Guarantee, and he talks about how faculty recruit undergrads to do research with them. And then finally, he closes this segment by talking about what are the most popular majors at the University of Richmond. Listen and enjoy.
And now, this week's interview with a special guest.
So, Gil, let's dive right in and talk about the University of Richmond. Why don't you, and I know you shared a few things last week. You touched on your incredible career center, which, by the way, I brag about to everybody because you are not exaggerating. You do have one of the absolute best ones in the country, and I tell all my students that. But that's all we really talked about Richmond last week. We're going to get more and do a deeper dive. So why don't you start out, give us the history of the University of Richmond.
So the University of Richmond started as a Baptist seminary for men in 1830 and became a college in 1840. By then, as you might imagine, in the United States, American higher education were really geared towards men. And I'm so glad that some institutions in the turn of the century decided, oh my gosh, we need to educate young women as well in our nation. And certainly that happened at the University of Richmond in 1914. And we're really excited that, we became co-educational at that point. We did some really innovative things back then. They're still actually considered innovative now. And that is making sure that, all opportunities are available to men and women. We wanted to make sure way back when in 1914 that whatever the guys got, the women received as well in terms of support, academic resources. And so even today, that is still the case. So Richmond is an institution of just over 3,000 undergraduate students located in the capital of the Commonwealth of Virginia, and that is Richmond. We're certainly a national liberal arts university, and we're known for offering what you would find in a liberal arts institution with the 8-to-1 ratio, an average class size of 16, no TAs teaching courses, faculty teach all of our students, and they have certainly can look forward to being mentored by faculty. But on top of that, we are also known for having the resources of a much larger institution, because instead of just one college, we actually have 5 schools, 3 of which are undergraduate. And amongst the schools is one of the top business schools for undergraduates in the United States. We have the first ever leadership school in the United States as well. So we think we're really super good at that also. And your quintessential liberal arts college in the School of Arts and Sciences. So students can look forward to more majors and minors than one would find at a liberal arts institution with over 100 majors and minors. We're Division 1 in our sports, when most liberal arts institutions are Division 3. We're really excited about the fact that we're one of the few schools left in the nation, less than 0.5%, that is both need-blinded admission and meets 100% of demonstrated need. And on top of that, we have merit scholarships at the University of Richmond. So I think the university is an institution that works very, very hard to prepare young people for leadership roles in society. And the fact that we are one of the more well-resourced schools around means that our students, and I'm just going to brag a little bit, are going to be pretty spoiled, right? So all of these resources pointed at you and faculty, because everything we do, right, is focused on undergraduate education. So I'll lead off with that.
I've never told you this before, Gil, but the very first student I ever worked with that went to the University of Richmond, she went in 2000 from the Westtown School. Her name was Julie Wilson. And this is when you guys had track and field back in, and she was like training for the Olympics. So she was like, just dominated all your track meets when she was there for 4 years. And she was in your your phenomenal leadership program, which is, once again, arguably the top program in the country. Talk a little bit more about your leadership studies program.
Sure. So I will say that the Jepson School for Leadership Studies is certainly pretty unique still in American higher education. What we try to do is to have students learn everything for and about leadership, right? And all of its different manifestations, good, bad, ugly, in between. It's not so much an institution where Mark can learn how to become the super leader, right? Rather, we're going to study leadership from many different academic vantage points, and sometimes, in a very interdisciplinary way, where a course might be team taught by faculty members from different, disciplines. So again, I think it's pretty exciting to have this program, because guess what we need in our society, not just here in the States, but overall in our global society. We want good leadership, and our students are in a position to understand the kind of leadership that will work for various types of organizations, even within different parts of the organization. So I guess, to us, I think that's a big plus for Richmond.
Something else that you guys do, and I tell everybody this, you guys do an amazing job in your admission process of noticing who leaders are. And I can tell that's something you prioritize in your selection process. I mean, obviously you're also looking at being able to do the work academically and being good characters, citizenship. But I've noticed, like, you guys consistently, when you see a kid with a lot of leadership, that kid, a lot of times my top leaders, they end up at your school. And I'm looking back over the years, because I currently have 8 or 9 at Richmond now, but I've had another 9 or 10 that have graduated. So, I've got almost about 20 kids, a track record of that have gone to your school. And that's going all the way back to like 2000, 2001. So I guess 1 a year on average. But yeah, but is that something you guys talk about in your admissions committee? Like, when you see high evidence of impact, like, that's a little asterisk. You're going to get an extra plus in our process, because I'm telling you, my kids, you have taken so many of my student body presidents and have gotten them, and kids that I just felt were some of the most exceptional kids that I've worked with. And they might not have been a kid that got a 15 to 1600 on the SAT, although you have those kids as well. But they're that kid that would be voted most likely to have impact on the college campus based on what they did on the high school campus.
Well, first, thank you so much for, again, believing in Richmond and promoting us to your wonderful students. So to be sure, we really employ a very holistic application review process, whereby everything and anything is considered within the context of application selection. So we look at basically not just the academics, but we ask ourselves about potential for contribution. We ask ourselves about character. We ask about, are you going to be a good roommate? Are you going to be in a position to uphold the honor code? So all of these things really make up for a really good spider, right? A good community member at the University of Richmond. As far as the leadership goes, I tell young people, you can be a leader without a title, So for us, and you use the word impact, Mark, and ultimately, that is what's the most important, right? You made an impact in your community, whether you have a title or not, because we're going to try our best to figure out during our application review and our committee process, just how you're going to add to our campus.
No, that's fantastic. By the way, Gil didn't call you all spiders. That's the nickname for Richmond. For those who don't know, the Richmond Spiders.
The only one. The only spiders, small and mighty.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, we're the only one.
Oh, so that's so cool. I didn't realize that. You're the only spiders in the country. I just did a college spotlight pretty recently on Virginia Tech, and they're the only one that has their school's nickname, named after a bird. And so I was doing it with Dave Williams, and he was freaking out over their nickname for their bird over there. So Virginia with the uniqueness here.
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
A few years ago at KIPP, we made an incredible hire. We hired a very talented Asian American young woman in her mid-20s whose primary job was to find scholarships for our students. Now, we've hired for this position multiple times before, but no one was as good at their job as she was. Now, I didn't get permission to use her name, and she went on to the University of Georgia to get her doctorate, and we've lost contact in the last few years. So I'm being a little cryptic. But in September of 2017, I met with her for about an hour to ask her what was, in her opinion, the resource that she had used where she had the most success when it came to finding outside or private scholarships for our kids, because she was getting triple the scholarships of anyone that we had hired before. And the recommended resource for episode 130, it is the website jlvcollegecounseling.com. That was the resource. That was her number one resource. This is the website of Jessica Velasco. Jessica is a former college admission counselor who has now dedicated herself to providing free scholarship information and admissions tips for high school students. jlvcollegecounseling.com is arranged in a way so you can really target scholarships by the following categories: monthly scholarships, scholarships by age, scholarships by major, state scholarships, minority scholarships, scholarships for undocumented students, international student scholarships, athletic scholarships, disability scholarships, gender scholarships, LGBTQ scholarships, military scholarships, scholarships for parents, religious scholarships, study abroad scholarships, scholarships for hobbies, interests, and talents. And recently they've added first responder scholarships. I also recommend you go to Jessica's website and add your email so you can receive her excellent monthly blog directly into your email inbox. I signed up for this 3 years ago myself, and it's full of great scholarship resources, but it's also full of great overall admissions advice as she pulls and draws from her experience as an admission officer. We will now return to my interview with Gil Villanueva as he helps us to understand the University of Richmond. So I've got a two-part question for you. Who are the biggest overlap schools for Richmond? And for our listeners, that means you have cross applications with them. Like students who apply here also apply to you. And when you both accept a kid, what are some of the reasons why students tell you that they chose you over the overlap school? So it's kind of a two-parter.
Oh, that's a great question. So in my tenure at Richmond, the number one school has not changed in terms of our biggest overlap, and that is the University of Virginia. The number two slot, we've had some change over the years. So lately it's been Boston College, followed by William and Mary. We have Wake Forest, we have Villanova, we have Georgetown, we have Wash U in St. Louis. We have schools like Washington and Lee here in Virginia as well. So as you might imagine, these are incredibly wonderful institutions. And also I forgot UNC Chapel Hill is in that group as well. So for us on our end, we're talking about steep competition. Now, in terms of why they would elect to pick Richmond, usually because we do run our admitted student questionnaires each and every year, and we really try to do our research so that we can do a better job the following cycle. So we understand that these students would select Richmond for these reasons. Number one, some of the schools that they're offered admission to might be a little bit too big for them. And Richmond, again, it's a very intimate place. The prospect of being mentored by faculty, not just being taught by faculty, but mentored by faculty, is a definite probability. And then the other piece to that is it's a pretty well-resourced school. They'd like to be spoiled a little bit. Spiders want to be spoiled. And then the other thing I will say is, and this is what pops up each and every year, we have generous financial aid. Again, we meet 100% of demonstrated need. We work our very, very best to minimize loans and work study for our incoming students. So again, I think all of those things help us, come up with the kind of class that we want at the University of Richmond.
Yeah, last I checked, Gil, you guys were at $2.7 billion for your endowment. I'm sure. Have you hit the $3 billion mark yet? Because you're getting close.
No, not at the $3 billion mark. But we are very, very fortunate. The university we want to make sure we understand that it's not a checkbook, and we want to make sure that we are good stewards of this endowment. But to be sure, when we do make investment, when we do invest, it's with faculty and students in mind. And that's why when you all visit campus, and I hope you do at some point, understand that this is one of the top 5 year in, year out most beautiful campuses in the United States. But it's not just the physical beauty of the campus, but understanding that all of what you see when you visit will be for undergraduates. Right? We do have graduate programs, but not to the point where these are not big programs at all. So the main focus would be undergraduate education.
Let me ask you to shed a little light on a couple other programs you have that my students love. One of them is your Richmond Guarantee, and I'd love you to talk about that. And the other is the paid research opportunities that undergraduate students can get, like even sophomore year, they can start doing research with faculty between the time they graduated in high school and when they go to and before they start college. They can start doing research with faculty, and then it just grows for all 4 years, and it grows into like a paid research opportunity. So if you could comment on a couple of those things, because I know my students have really appreciated both your Richmond Guarantee as well as, your paid research opportunities.
Well, I appreciate you mentioning that. So the Richmond Guarantee guarantees all traditional undergraduates guaranteed funding for them to conduct their own research over the summer, mentored by faculty, of course, or to pursue an unpaid internship. So the latter is really interesting because we feel like, well, don't let, raising money or making money be an obstacle for you to have that experience. So we feel that by being able to do their own research or pursue an unpaid internship, it sets our students apart from other students because you've had that experience that might distinguish you when you're thinking about employment, when you're applying to graduate school or professional school. So we feel genuinely it's a difference maker for the university. And the last time I counted, I don't think many schools offer this kind of program. So to the point I made earlier, it's kind of nice to be spoiled, right, guys? So, and faculty, being an undergraduate institution, when our faculty are doing their own work, their own research, their scholarly endeavors, it's going to be with undergraduates. It's not going to be with teaching assistants. So earlier you mentioned that, well, sometimes as early as your first year, you get recruited by faculty, right, in their labs. And that happens. So, I always feel as if that, if I had an opportunity to do it all again, I'd be looking for a school like Richmond because I would like to be spoiled too.
Well, we've talked about your exceptional business program, and I know you're strong in all those areas. I've had multiple students go through your finance degree, your accounting degree, and other degrees within that business program. And we've talked about your leadership studies program being very unique and creative, and just really adroit at what you do there. Talk to me about some other majors that maybe fly under the radar, where you feel that you may have a particularly exceptional faculty or course offerings or programming or track record, but maybe they don't get as much attention as your business school, your leadership studies program.
Well, I will say having so many departments and so many majors and minors, I always feel that there's quality across the board. There's excellence across the board. So I feel like if you look at the School of Arts and Sciences, they're our largest school at the University of Richmond, and everyone begins in the School of Arts and Sciences. And indeed, 70% of our students will end up with a degree or two, or a minor, or all three from the School of Arts and Sciences. And within the school, I always feel that, it's important for us to talk about certain programs that are I don't want to say popular, but populated, right, by a good number of students that are enrolled. So I think about our psychology department. I think about our art program, our music and theater. I think about our English department, political science. I think about, biology, chemistry. So these programs and departments are super, super excellent, especially if you stop and think of the amount of scholarly work that's being produced year in and year out by faculty and students. And certainly I would add and I think this is a growing movement across the United States, that there's a lot more interdisciplinarity in the curriculum at a lot of schools. So students, whenever you see studies after an academic subject or topic, that should give you a hint that that's an interdisciplinary kind of major. And that means that program actually it's a pretty encompassing approach to the study of that topic. And sometimes there's different disciplines, academic disciplines, that feed into that. I'll give you an example. So the University of Richmond has a program called Healthcare Studies. So we have students that perhaps might be thinking about healthcare work, but wish to know the political and economic impact of healthcare in our society, perhaps. We also have a program in philosophy, politics, economics, and law. You're not going to find many schools with that kind of major, but because we have the breadth of programs at Richmond, we feel that we can actually combine these things and have a major that students want to study. And in fact, in the outside world these days, everything is so interconnected now, students, that no matter what your special discipline is or your major is, you're going to find that you're going to be shoulder to shoulder with a lot of different people from different disciplines, because it goes back to the idea that sometimes the best way to solve a problem is to look at things from many different lenses. And that's why I think interdisciplinary programs, are going to be becoming more and more prevalent in American higher education.
I love interdisciplinary programs. I mean, they're just fantastic. So, let's say you're studying poverty, you study it from the sociological perspective. Then you study it from the, economics perspective and anthropology perspective and, political science. It's just fascinating. I think it's such a great way to develop critical thinkers.
Next week in the news, an article by Elizabeth Redden from Inside Higher Ed, Pandemic Hurts Student Mental Health. Mark and Nico will discuss the chapter entitled 32 Things Athletes Should Do to Get a Scholarship. Our question from a listener is from Michelle from Washington. She asks, is it beneficial to take out a small student loan to establish credit? And our interview is the final part with Gil Villanueva, Understanding the University of Richmond, which will also serve as our college spotlight.
And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. Your College Bound Kid is produced by Dave Vasaya of podcastengineers.com. If you find this podcast helpful, it would help us tremendously if you would subscribe and write us a review on your favorite podcast listening station. And please be sure to click the share button and send this to someone you know that can really use this information. The amazing music that you hear is by Victor Allen Weeks. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Webmaster is Stalianos Dimitru. And marketing designs are by Kimberly Blass. And if you want to get a copy of the book, 171 Answers to the Most Asked College Admissions Questions, you can go right to 171answers.com. And if you want to have a college coaching session with Mark, you can send him a text to area code 404-664-4340. And if you have a question or a few questions that you would like to ask us, and we'll include them on the show, you can just email us at questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Every week, we'll take one question and include it in the episode. We don't like your questions. We love your questions. So send them our way. And by the way, check out our website, yourcollegeboundkid.com. Again, we thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to meeting with you again next week.